The blood pooling on the floor of St. Jude's North Ward hadn't come from any patient, and the woman standing over the body, scalpel steady in her hand. Movements precise, eyes cold and detached, was not a doctor. For 3 years, the staff at St. Jude's had believed Alina Vance was nothing more than the quiet night nurse. She changed 4 bags, avoided eye contact, and blended into the background. They thought she was shy. They thought she was fragile. They were wrong. When a heavily armed man sealed off the 4th floor and took 20 hostages, he believed himself to be the predator. He had no idea he'd trapped himself in a cage with a ghost. This was the night the hunter became the hunted. It was a Tuesday in November when the rain began. Relentless sheets pounding against the glass facade of St. Jude's Memorial Hospital in Seattle. On the 4th floor, trauma and post-op shared a tense stillness. The air carried the sharp scent of antiseptic and floor wax. It was the dead of night. The graveyard shift. Alina Vance sat at the nurse's station, the blue glow of the monitor reflecting off her dark, unblinking eyes. To anyone passing by, Alina barely existed. She was 34, with mouse-brown hair pulled into a tight, fraying bun. She walked with a slight shuffle, shoulders rounded, as though she wanted to take up as little space as possible. She spoke softly, never raised her voice, never challenged doctors. "She's like a robot," whispered Sarah Jenkins, a 22-year-old nurse fresh out of college. Scrolling through TikTok at the far end of the desk, I asked her what she did all weekend, and she said laundry. Who does laundry for 48 hours? Dr. Marcus Halloway, the lead trauma surgeon on call, didn't bother looking up from his charts. As long as she preps the meds right, I don't care if she stares at a wall. Just keep her away from the families. She's got the bedside manner of a wet mop. Halloway was brilliant, arrogant, and exhausted. He'd just finished a 6-hour vascular repair on a gunshot victim and was running purely on caffeine and ego. He didn't notice people like Alina. He didn't notice how her footsteps made no sound. He didn't notice that when a metal tray crashed in the cafeteria 3 floors below, Alina didn't flinch. Instead, she shifted onto the balls of her feet, eyes flicking instinctively toward the exits before anyone else even processed the noise. He didn't notice the scar tissue tracing a jagged line from her collarbone down her right shoulder, hidden beneath her scrubs. Alina typed her notes. Patient in 404 stable. Vitals normal. Drip replaced. She wasn't bored. She was alert. Old habits never disappeared, they simply slept. 7 years earlier, Alina Vance hadn't been wiping foreheads. She had been Staff Sergeant Vance, signed to a cultural support team working alongside the 75th Ranger Regiment in Afghanistan's Pesh Valley. She had cleared enemy compounds in complete darkness. She had treated sucking chest wounds while under fire from a ridgeline 300 meters away. She had walked away from that life so she told herself. "Hey, Vance," Sarah chirped, snapping her gum. "Can you take the trash to the chute? The elevator freaks me out." Alina looked up, expression blank. "Sure." She rose without wasted motion, lifted the heavy bags with ease, muscle rippling unexpectedly beneath pale skin, then deliberately slumped her shoulders again, hiding her strength. She headed down the dim hallway as thunder rattled the windows. Near the elevator bank, she heard it. Not a sound that belonged in a hospital. Not wheels or pagers. It was the sharp, metallic clack of a rifle bolt slamming forward. Alina froze. The shuffle vanished. Her spine straightened. Her breathing stopped. Ding. The elevator doors slid open at the far end of the hall. Alina stepped silently back into the shadows of the utility room, leaving the door cracked open just enough to see. A man stepped out huge. At least 6'4", easily 250 pounds. Rain soaked his trench coat, heavy boots thudding softly against the floor. A duffel bag hung from his shoulder. In his hands was an AR-15 short barrel, holographic sight. Not cheap, not improvised. This was someone who knew weapons. He didn't look unhinged. He looked calm. Alina watched him pass her hiding place, heading straight for the nurse's station. He moved slowly, deliberately. She glanced at her wristband, old battered G-Shock. 2:14. Her phone was back at the desk. She was unarmed, trapped in a dead-end room, and a wolf had just entered the pen. The silence shattered not with a scream, but a command, "Nobody move." From the darkness, Alina watched chaos erupt. Dr. Holloway dropped his clipboard. Sarah's phone slipped from her fingers and skidded across the linoleum. The gunman Silas Thorne, the name the world would soon know, chicked. The waiting room doors shut and jammed a wedge beneath them. The floor was sealed. Hands on the desk. Thorne barked. Sarah screamed, "Bang!" He fired into the ceiling. The blast thundered through the hallway, raining dust and debris. "Next one goes in a kneecap," Thorne snarled. "Where's Holloway?" The surgeon stepped forward, shaking. I'm Dr. Holloway. You remember me?" Thorne hissed. "Mary Thorne. 3 years ago, table 4. You said it was routine. You said she'd be home for Christmas." Holloway stammered. "I operate on thousands. You killed her." Thorne screamed. "You were drunk. I spent 3 years proving it. Tonight, we have a trial." He turned the rifle toward Sarah. "Get the patients out. Everyone into the hall. If they can't walk, drag them." From the utility room, Elena's heart rate spiked, not with fear, but focus. Time slowed. She analyzed everything. One hostile. AR-15. Sidearm visible. Confined space. Limited cover. Charging now would be suicide. Staying hidden was useless. She needed proximity. Alina inhaled, closed her eyes briefly, and switched personas. The soldier faded. The timid nurse emerged. She pushed the door open and stumbled out, trash bags crashing loudly to the floor. "Freeze." Thorne snapped, rifle swinging toward her. Alina threw up her hands, shaking violently, shoulders hunched, voice breaking. "Please don't shoot. I'm just the nurse. I was taking out the trash." Thorne saw fear, weakness, prey. He didn't see her eyes checking his rifle's safety. He didn't see her calculating distance to the crash cart. "Get over here," he ordered. She stumbled forward, deliberately clumsy, and joined Sarah and Holloway. She squeezed Sarah's hand hard. "It's okay," Alina whispered. "Just breathe." Thorne tossed a bundle of zip ties at her. "Tie them up. If you mess it up, the girl dies first." Alina forced her hands to shake as she worked. Binding Holloway, she leaned in close and whispered, her voice suddenly calm. "Absolute. When the lights go out, drop and don't move until I say clear." She moved to Sarah. "You're not going to die," she murmured. "I'm here." At 0225, Thorne turned away for half a second. Elena's gaze flicked to the breaker panel too far. She needed a weapon. "Check the patients," Thorne ordered. She nodded and walked away. The moment she turned the corner, the shuffle disappeared. Inside room 402. She moved fast, grabbing alcohol, gauze, a lighter, then an oxygen tank, a defibrillator. She checked the charge full. She wrapped torn fabric around her knuckles. "I will never leave a fallen comrade." She stepped back into the hallway, standing tall now. Trauma shears hidden at her side. A paralytic vial clenched in her other hand. "Stop," Thorne warned, sensing the change. "No," Alina said calmly. Silence fell. "And you should have checked the back exit," she added. Thorne flinched just for a moment. It was a lie, but it gave her half a second. Asterisk. Alina moved. The human brain needs about 150 milliseconds to recognize what the eyes see, and another 100 milliseconds to tell the muscles to respond. In close quarters combat, that quarter of a second is everything. It is the thin line between surviving and being carried home under a folded flag. When Thorne glanced toward the non-existent back exit. He gave Alina that moment. She didn't run. Running awakens the predator's instinct to chase. Instead, she launched forward in a low, explosive crouch, devouring the 10 meters between them with frightening speed. This wasn't the movement of a nurse. It was the trajectory of a weapon. Thorne realized the trick instantly. His head snapped back, his finger tightening on the trigger crack. The rifle fired, but his aim was too high. The round shattered the fluorescent light above Alina. showering the hallway with sparks and glass. She didn't hesitate. She dropped to her knees and slid the final meter beneath the rifle's barrel. She didn't aim for his face. She went for the gun. Asterisk her left hand, still clutching the glass. Vial of succinylcholines lammed upward into the rifle's handguard, forcing the muzzle toward the ceiling. At the same time, her right hand drove the trauma shears down, not to stab him, but to destroy the weapon. She jammed the shears into the ejection port and twisted hard. Metal screamed against metal. The bolt carrier seized. The rifle became useless, just dead weight. Thorn roared in raw animal fury. He released the rifle with one hand and struck her with the other. The blow was brutal. It lifted Alina off the floor and sent her skidding across the wax tiles. Copper filled her mouth. Her vision blurred for a heartbeat. "You bitch." Thorn screamed. He tried to rack the charging handle, but the shears were wedged deep. The weapon was finished. He dropped it and went for the 1911 on his hip. Alina shook off the haze. She was 5 feet away, flat on the floor. She couldn't reach the pistol first. She looked at Holloway and Sarah, frozen in terror. "Run," Alina shouted. "Stairwell now." The command shattered their paralysis. Holloway grabbed Sarah and dragged her toward the fire exit. Thorn drew his pistol and aimed at the fleeing surgeon. Alina seized the nearest object, a heavy wheeled Verstanden, and shoved it with everything she had. It slammed into Thorn's legs just as he fired. Bang! The bullet tore into the drywall inches from Sarah's head. They burst through the stairwell doors and vanished. Now it was just Alina and Thorn. He turned toward her, eyes wild and unhinged. He raised the pistol. Alina rolled. Bang! Bung! Bullets chewed into the tiles where she'd been moments before. She scrambled behind the nurse's station, pressing herself against the inner wall as the countertop absorbed the shots. "I see you," Thorn called, advancing slowly. "You think you're a hero? You're just a dead nurse." Alina checked herself. No bullet wounds, just a swollen jaw and bruised ribs. She listened. His boots crunched over broken glass. He was circling left. She needed to change the battlefield. She spotted the UPS battery backup beneath the desk heavy. Leadacid. Crunch. 6 feet crunch. 2. Alina ripped the power cord free and lifted the unit. Instead of retreating, she stepped into him. As Thorn rounded the desk, expecting to find her cowering, he found her standing. She swung the ups like a medieval flail. It struck his wrist with a sickening crack. Bone gave way. Thorn screamed, dropping the pistol. It skidded across the floor and vanished beneath a locked medication cabinet. He was disarmed, but still massive, still enraged. He tackled her. They slammed into the wall. The impact drove the air from Elena's lungs. His hands clamped around her throat, crushing. Her vision narrowed. Black spots bloomed. "Die," he spat. Panic clawed at her mind. No. She forced herself to think clinically. Target, anterior neck. Objective, break the hold. She stopped clawing at his face and dug her thumbs into the nerve clusters at his elbows. He grunted but didn't release her. She brought her knees up, wedging them between their bodies, then exploded outward heels, driving into his solar plexus. The force broke his grip. Thorn staggered back, choking for air. Alina collapsed to the floor, gasping, her throat burning. He recovered quickly. Too quickly. Thorn pulled an 8-inch serrated combat knife from his boot and grinned through the pain. Now it gets fun. Alina kicked open the supply room door and hurled herself inside, slamming the deadbolt just as his body crashed against it. Thud. "Open it." He screamed, hacking at the door. "I'm going to carve you up." Alina backed away. 10 by 10 feet. No windows. One door. But she wasn't trapped. She was in an armory. 2 civilians. The room held bandages and saline. To a ranger, it was a chemical stockpile. Her breathing slowed. Fear drained away, replaced by cold calculation. "You want the dark?" she whispered. She shattered the light bulb. The room plunged into blackness. By memory alone, she moved ethanol, ammonia, bleach. a canister of ethyl chloride freeze spray. Gunfire erupted outside. Thorne blasted the lock. The door burst open. He stood silhouetted by hallway light, unable to see inside. "Come out, little nurse," he taunted, stepping in. Alina was already gone, pressed high against the shelving near the ceiling, silent. Thorne advanced, knife raised, breathing loud and ragged. She dropped, not onto him behind him. He spun, slashing air. She ducked beneath the blade and smashed a towel-wrapped bottle of ether into his face. Glass shattered. Fumes flooded his lungs. He gagged and flailed, slicing her abdomen as she clung to him. "Breathe deep," she whispered. His movements slowed. The knife fell. He collapsed. Alina dragged herself to the door, gasping, kicking it open for air. Thorne lay unconscious. Then the PA crackled. Code black. Code black. Fire in the North Ward. Smoke poured from room 402. Sprinklers erupted. Alina turned back. Thorne's hand moved. He wasn't out. He rose, blood and ether streaming down his face, clutching a detonator. "If I die, everyone dies," he rasped. C4. Oxygen storage. Alina froze. 10 feet, empty hands. She saw the pen in her pocket. She threw it. The pen struck his eye. He flinched. The detonator flew from his grasp, skidding across the wet floor. They both dove. They collided, no tactics now, just survival. He broke her rib. She smashed her forehead into his nose. Alina locked in a triangle choke and squeezed. "Go to sleep," she growled. Thorne struggled, then slowed, then stopped. She held for 10 more seconds, then released. Alina lay beneath the sprinklers, bleeding, exhausted. "Clear," she whispered. But the fire was spreading, and 12 patients still needed her. She stood, dragged Thorne into the supply room, secured the door with a zip tie, and turned back toward the flames. "Time to get to work," she said. The quiet after the fight barely lasted. It was swallowed by a far more terrifying sound, the deep, hungry roar of fire taking full control. Sprinklers hissed overhead, drenching the floor in a cold gray haze. But they were losing. Room 402 wasn't just burning any. Marit had become a furnace. Fed by accelerants, thick black smoke poured into the corridor, rolling across the ceiling like a dark tide. It was heavy and greasy, burning the lungs with the stench of melting plastic and scorched linen. Alina coughed, soot coating her tongue, blood lingering beneath it. She forced herself upright. Pain ripped through her ribs, probably fractured from Thorne's kicks. Her stomach burned where the knife had grazed her. Her head spun from lingering ether fumes. But the Ranger mindset was still locked in. Pain is data. Data can be used. Ignore the pain. Focus on the mission. Objective 1. Neutralize the explosion risk. Objective 2. Evacuate patients who can't move. She limped toward the oxygen storage room beside. 402. The wall between them radiated heat. Inside were 20 compressed oxygen tanks. If those tanks failed, or if the fire reached the C Thorne had planted, the hospital wouldn't just burn. It would be torn apart. The door was locked through the reinforced window. She saw the brick of C4 taped to the main manifold. No timer. The detonator had been the only trigger. C4 itself was stable, but oxygen tanks under extreme heat were not. If one ruptured, the pressure release would be catastrophic. Alina grabbed towels from a nearby linen cart, soaked them in pooled sprinkler water, and jammed them under the door, sealing the gap. It wouldn't stop the fire, but it would slow the heat long enough to matter. She turned to wardroom 402, Mrs. Gable, the open doorway, vomited smoke and heat. Alina dropped low, pulling her scrub collar over her mouth, and crawled inside. Visibility was 0. Heat seared her skin as flames climbed the curtains and ceiling. "Mrs. Gable," she shouted. A weak cough answered. Alina stayed below the thermal layer, crawling until her hand found fabric. Mrs. Gable had tried to escape and fallen. "I've got you," Lena grunted. The woman was terrified. barely conscious, dead weight from smoke inhalation. My hip, Mrs. Gable moaned. I know, Alina said. This will hurt. She dragged the woman across the floor as heat melted the soles of her shoes. The hallway came into reach just as the ceiling in 402 collapsed in a shower of sparks. Alina rolled onto her back, gasping. The hallway air was toxic but survivable. Mrs. Gable was breathing. Rapid pulse. Burns on her arms. Stay down, Alina ordered. Smoke was lowering fast. In minutes, the entire floor would become lethal. 11 more rooms remained. 11 patients. Some post-op, some immobilized. One in traction, Alina stood alone. Help was coming, but not fast enough. She needed leverage. She ran to the nurse's station, grabbed the master keys, unlocked the supply closet, and confirmed Thorne was still unconscious. She cut the zip ties from his ankles, took his heavy trench coat, and moved on. Room 405, Mr. Henderson, 250 pounds, total knee replacement. I can't walk, he croaked as smoke seeped in. I didn't ask you to, Alina said. She threw the trench coat on the floor. Get on. Her voice carried the authority of a drill sergeant. Adrenaline took over. He obeyed. The coat became a sled. The wet waxed floor reduced friction. Alina hauled him into the hallway. Hold Mrs. Gable's hand. Don't let go. She moved on. Room by room. Breach, secure, extract, sheets, wheelchairs, anything that moved. She linked them together in the center of the hall. Away from the flames, fire punched through the ceiling. Burning debris fell like rain. 10 patients evacuated, 2 left. Room 410, Leo. A young boy recovering from internal injuries. Room 412, a comatose patient on a ventilator. The path to 410 was blocked by fire. Alina soaked herself with water from a janitor's bucket, took a breath, and ran straight through the flames. Captain Miller stood at the base of the stairwell. Reports were chaos. Fire had overtaken the 4th floor. We go up, Miller said. They breached the door into a wall of smoke and heat. Then they saw it. A chain of patients, dragging, crawling, holding hands huddled low under wet blankets. Get them out, Miller shouted as SWAT evacuated the line. Miller asked, Where's the nurse? She went back, Henderson said. For the kid. Miller stared down the burning hallway. Vance. He yelled, No answer. Protocol demanded retreat. They sealed the floor. Alina found Leo hiding under the bed, screaming. She shielded him with her body as debris fell. But the stairwell was gone. Cut off. She turned to the window. Reinforced glass? She smashed it with an oxygen tank. Once, twice. The 3rd strike shattered it. Wind rushed in. Fire surged. Below, 50 feet down the ladder, truck strained in the storm too far.